Empowering Coupleship, Part 4, Love. Is it inspired or unmotivated? Very interesting title today. But before I want to share some love right now before I get into this. That is love in the moment. And that is, I know our technical team are beating themselves up right now. And I want to say to you, smile. Let it go. We love you. I know them. I know them. They'll still be kicking themselves tomorrow. But if we don't do something, so we want to say thank you. You guys you're awesome. You do what you do. You're professionals. And, I've seen people in billion-dollar companies with, the whole world watching. and things don't go right. And so things don't go right all the time, and we'll figure it out. But I want to say God bless you. I love you, and I love what you do, and I thank you for what you do. So God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. So empowering coupleship. In this series, in today's message, we're talking about love. We're going to focus on love and different kinds of love and how that works. But I want to remind you again, this series is for everybody. This series will address people who are single, who want to stay single, that you have no intentions of ever having a partner. If that's what you want, this series there's information in this series for you. There's information in this series for you if you want a date but you don't have a date. Maybe we can help you get a date. But and also for those of you who are dating, those of you who are also engaged couple. There are some of you who are moving right along in your relationships and you're engaged and you want to get married. Those of you there are people who are living together. And we're going to have a message for that, and we're going to focus on that particular episode where we're just talking about living together. Back in the day when I was growing up, we embarrassed people who were living together so they wouldn't even come to church. We said they were shacking, and we said other things about, I want to treat you just like Jesus would, and I believe Jesus would, and that is he would share with you the information that he would give to anyone else, and we want you to receive that in an environment where you're not challenged, in an environment where you cannot be embarrassed, and you can open your heart to receive what Jesus said, because what Jesus said will change our lives, and what Jesus said will change everything. And so there may be newlyweds, people who are brand new, and we may have some information for you today, especially because if you're newlywed, can't nobody tell you nothing. Your love is on strong. It's like, poof, we'll never break up. Everything is fine. We're great. And so we want to give you some information just for down the road. And also those of you who've been married for a long time, we have information for you today. And so just to recap a little, last week we talked about the concept of I owe you who? Me. I owe you me. I owe you who I am. And the focus is that's from the perspective of the person that's saying this and that's giving the love. I owe you me. And we're doing that by resetting our expectations as far as our expectations of what we're going to get from the person that's loving me. And when you separate those two and you just focus on loving your partner instead of expecting and waiting for your partner to love you, that sets you up for a whole different lifestyle, especially when both people are doing that. And I shouldn't just say especially. It only works when both people are doing that. When both people are saying, I owe you me, and you're both motivated to actually cause the other person's dreams to come true. And that's your goal, whatever their desires are. And so remember, here at GTM, we're focusing on people who have, whatever you're doing in your current marriage, we want to help you with that. We want to enhance that. It may be the best. You may be excited and happy. We just want to enhance that. Also, those of you who are just getting started in marriage, you want a good start, this information will help you. And those of you who are looking for a partner, this information will help you. But this information, especially today, will also help you get prepared for a partner. Many of us, we especially when we're single and we want to be married, we're looking for someone to fulfill our expectations. We're looking for someone that meets our criteria. We're looking for that perfect person, right? There's a Mr. Right somewhere or Ms. Right somewhere. We expect to either run into them or find them or hope they find us. We got all kind of, thoughts on that. Some people say, well, ladies, you're not supposed to be looking, let the man find you. And we use scripture to validate that and try and validate that. I'm just saying, be prepared. Men, be prepared for who you're looking for. Women, be prepared for who you're looking for. And so our desire here at Grace Transformational Ministries is this. We want to create the environment so that wherever you are on that spectrum, you can grow, you can progress. Your life should be changing daily and weekly as you go. It's too bad that we focus so hard on the goal at the end instead of learning how to enjoy the journey of where we are while we're traveling. And so while you're going, at whatever stage you're in, don't get so focused on what you desire and what you want that you can't look at where you are and enjoy your life right there, because it's changing. Your life is changing while you're going through the process. So we learn how to enjoy the process. And when I say enjoy the process is not always painless, right? Sometimes there's pain in the process. And so we want you to understand that and have expectations to know that pain doesn't last always, and that but change sometimes is painful. It usually always is, especially big changes. And so we want to connect you with your inner man, your inner woman, so that you can be honest and true with yourself, and you don't have to try and hide that from anybody else. And also to be honest and open with your partner, especially those of you who are married and those of you who are looking for partners. Be honest and open with them, because you know the game. When you're dating, you put your best self out front and you hide the worst of you. That's just the name of the game. And when you do that, and a lot of us, we were so good at it, we did that right up until we came to the altar to say I do. And then then the next day, cat was out the bag, right? That next day was on. So we want to learn to be honest and open with ourselves, with the person that we want to spend the rest of our lives with. If that's true, and you really want to spend the rest of your life with someone, you don't want to be hiding stuff that you may pop up anytime, because it's going to pop up. When it comes up, it could be ugly. So we want to help you to deal with that. And so last week we talked about, we reminded you of, because the last couple of weeks we actually talked about all the expectations, and these are just categories of expectations that you have. And we made sure that we added emotional needs to that category, because many times we focus so much on the other things, and what we feel like we really need is emotional. I want your attention. I don't want a gift. Give me you. Like we said, I owe you who? Me. And so we want to talk about emotional needs, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But when something happens, because we do come to the altar with expectations. When we come to the altar for marriage, we come to that place expecting happiness. I mean, we love the end of the story to say, and they live happily ever after. And so we expect happiness, and we expect that other person to make that happen. We expect happiness. You are part of that, and without you, I can't have that happiness. And some of us, we said that. You're the expression of my happiness. But anyway, there are a lot of emotional needs that needs to happen. So the question last week was, what happens when whatever your most important needs are, their emotional needs, and we're going to talk about those today, and you're going to love the assignment today for the challenge this week. If you've never done any challenge in the whole 3 years that we've been doing this, you want to do this challenge. Whether you're married, single, dating, happily unmarried, happily single, happily decoupled, however it is, you're going to want to do that today. But the question is from last week is, what happens when your most important needs are not being met? And especially if you have come to an altar and you've agreed and you've promised someone else that you will look to them only to fulfill these needs. If you're married, your spouse is the only legitimate expression of full-on love that you'll ever know. And if that partner is not causing you to have that, then you got a miserable life. And if you have a miserable life, you're not happy. They're not happy. And if you got kids, trust me, they're not happy. And they know. They know. You can't hide that stuff from your kids. They know. In my first marriage, my previous wife and I, we were, things just weren't going well. And one day, some of you know my daughter. She's working today, but she's been working a lot of Sundays. But she was probably about 8 years old, somewhere in there. And her and her brother used to sit up, and they get up early in the morning and they watch, what was that religious cartoon? Anyway, they were watching something. And I walked in and she was crying. And, No, it's some book. But anyway, it wasn't Bible, man. It's you know, she's in her 30s, so that's how old that is. So, but they were watching, that cartoon, and something had happened on the cartoon where I guess the parents had broken up, and Tashita was crying, and so when I went and talked to her and asked her what was going on, and she said, she told me what was going on in the story, and then she told me, she says, and I just don't want you and Mom to break up. So kids, they know what's going on, and they may not understand it all, and so whatever is going on, we need to deal openly with it, because see, I really didn't know how to deal openly with it, and neither of us have. We got married young and all kinds of issues. And so what do you do when these expectations are not met? And last week we talked about several things. Sometimes we do nothing, and that's dysfunctional. We act like nothing's going on. And I was the kind of person who would do nothing. I was the kind of person who we had a dysfunctional household. We would go to church and everybody would be happy, including the kids, and everybody thought we were happy. Then we come home, then I'd go downstairs in the basement in my place, and then the kids may come down there and play, and then the wife would stay upstairs in her space, and that is so unhealthy. And we need to deal with those kinds of things. So when you do nothing, you're just burying the things in your heart, and they're going to come out eventually. And so the other thing sometimes what we do is we just create distractions. We pour our whole life into the kids. We pour our whole life into work. We work overtime. We ask. It's like, is there any overtime today? Because I don't want to go home. That's really what you might as well say. I hate going home, so if there's work, I want to stay at work. Or you pour yourself into your hobbies. You pour yourself into other things. And if you don't do that, sometimes eventually you do this, and this is when it gets kind of bad. That's when you just find somebody else to fulfill those needs. It's like, okay, and it doesn't just happen like that. Next week we're gonna talk about. I believe the title is going to be "My Love Bank," because we each have a love bank, and your love bank is always open. That bank never closes. And if anybody makes a deposit, you respond. And so if you are married, you want most of your deposits to come from your spouse. And if they're not making good deposits and there's withdrawals happening and someone else is making deposits, you're attracted to whoever's making the most deposits. That's just the real deal. And we're going to talk about that. And so As we get into today, there's so many people hungry for love. I want to see if you can, before I tell you who this quote came from, part of this quote, we'll bring it up. This person said this: the greatest disease in the West today is not tuberculosis or leprosy. It is being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for. Who do you think said that? Anybody know who said that? There's a little bit more. We'll go on. Then, I'll give you a clue. Then she said, we can cure physical diseases with medicine, but the only cure for loneliness and despair and hopelessness is love. Who do you think she is? Whoa, I wasn't expecting that guess. That's a good one. It sounds like her. That's a good one, but that was not her quote. Because she's trying to guess too. Y'all should have watched her. She's trying to figure it out. Here it was. Yep, Mother Teresa. The rest of what she said is there are many in the world who are dying for a piece of bread, but there are many more dying for a little love. And sometimes we pledge our lives to a certain person to get the bulk of that love from, and it's not happening. And so at GTM, we want to help marriages, we want to help all kinds of relationships to make sure that we understand how that works. For example, there are 4 Greek words that we need to understand when we talk about love. 4 Greek words for love. There's storge love, filial love, eros love, and agape love. And probably most of you have at least heard of those before, and you know what some of those are. And we're going to go through some of those, but we need to understand a little bit about Greek. You know, a lot of what we understand started out from the Greek. When you read the New Testament, you know, it was either written, they spoke Aramaic, it was written, much of it is written in Greek. And so when we break down the word love in a lot of places in the New Testament, it's some of these different words that it's actually saying. That's the original word there. And so we need to understand what it's saying. So for example, let's get started with the first one, storge love. It's the affectionate family kind of love. That's where you have feelings for one another, where you love your brother, you love your sister, you love your mother, you love your dad, you love your people. These are your people. You love them. C.S. Lewis, who was, I think he passed away in like 1963. But if you are a person who don't understand the Bible and can't believe it, if you read some of his books, he has some awesome writings because he's a great apologetic. And he was not an official theologian, but you would have thought he was. And when I say official, it's not like he went to school to be that, but he wrote some awesome books that explains a lot of things that we turn spiritual into spiritual and don't understand. But anyway, one of the things that he said is what you see in quotes there, because this kind of love is the most organic kind of love. He said this is the most comfortable kind of love and the least aesthetic. In other words, you don't get really excited about this. This is the love. This is what you come home to. This is the family kind of love. And we all need this kind of love. You came here, in a family, and you need this kind of love. So the next kind of love is filial love, reciprocal quality. This is friendship kind of love, and there's several levels of this according to Aristotle, and we'll talk about that. And you hear me mention these Greek names because this is where this language actually came from. In other words, if I give you this, then you give me that. That's reciprocal. And there's another word we used several Sundays ago. That's transactional kind of love. But it's still love, and it's transactional kind of love. But it's very necessary. It produces the fewest pains and the most pleasure. This is kind of safe. It's kind of safe, but it's not real deep. But there's certain levels of this kind of love. So the first level is what Aristotle called the friendships of utility. In other words, these are your acquaintances. These are the people that you work with. And so there's practical benefits that you get and they get from this kind of love, both parties. And these kind of people, they come and they go. They come and they go. So no big deal. Or no lost love, right? No big deal. The second level of this kind of love is the friendships of pleasure. And these are your drinking buddies. These are the people who've gone through the similar kind of things you've gone through. These are the people who've gone through the same kind of hardships you have, so you can relate to each other. You mean something to each other. You know you can look to this person because they understand. You got some friends like that? We all do, right? That's my bud. But according to Aristotle, these kind of buddies, they also come and go. But then there's a third level of filial love, and that's the friendship of the good. In other words, these are your true friends. These are the deep ones, not because of what they do, but these guys, they click in at a deep level. This is the third and deepest level of filial love. But it's still transactional, but it's deep. That's according to Aristotle. And the third kind of love is eros love. It's where we get our word, what? Erotic. And where we also talk about romantic love. And some of us thought this was the only kind of love there was, right? It's like, what else is there? It's romantic love. But this is that passionate, rapturous love. This is the kind of love that goes real high, and it can also go real low. This is where you experience the greatest feelings of the human experience when you have this kind of love. This is the kind of love that we talk about when especially, I think I talked about this when we were talking about singles, especially young singles and teenagers who fall in love. Just because of the way our brain works, just your brain does certain things. And then we did more research, and we found out, for example, teenagers, there's a certain part of their brain that's not developed yet. And so when they fall in love, that part that's not developed, it's still wide open. Can't nobody tell you nothing. You are in love, you know the person loves you, and you have fallen in love. And it's a deep dive. You need somebody to come rescue you because you're not coming up by yourself. And your brain, if you're a teenager, those are the kind of decisions that you make. But what we also found is the same thing, the chemicals that are released in your brain at that age are the same chemicals that's released no matter how old you are when you first fall in love with somebody. So when you fall in love, your nose is wide open. You are totally open and ready for whatever is happening here. For example, this is the kind of love you get addicted to. You get addicted to the source of where it's coming from. You want to protect it. You want to hide it because you want to keep it. It may not be right, but how could something feel so good, be so wrong, and all that kind of stuff. And you want to maintain the source of this at all costs because this kind of love reaches deep. And we find ourselves sometimes where we didn't intend to because these are progressions of love. For example, if you have a friend, some of us, I think one of the most awesome things is when somebody marries their best friend. I was very different growing up. And maybe it's just because I moved. So when I say moved, our family moved so many different times. So I didn't have time to develop good friends. But I only had one person that I ever thought was my best friend in my life. And, I didn't expect that. I'm getting emotional. And that was in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I don't know where he is today. But we were best buddies. We got in trouble in school. Can you imagine me getting in trouble in school? I got in trouble. We got in trouble in school together. We were the two smartest people in all of our classes, and we just hit it off. I lived with my grandparents at that time. He lived with his grandmother at that time. And my family had moved to Chicago. His family had moved to Chicago. So we had a lot of things in common. But when you have a best friend that you've grown up and you've gone through some things together, and you are now best friends, and you want to get married to that person, and you choose to marry that person, that could be one of the greatest lives that you could ever have, to marry your best friend, because you've got not just history, but you're pulling all of these kinds of love together because you understand those kinds of love and you can hold on to them. But if you move ahead to erotic love without knowing what the next kind of love we're going to talk about, and you get full of that, this is where you get lost. You become addicted to the source of the love. You want to protect it. You want to keep it. You want to maintain the source of it. And because here's the expansion of it. And when you look at that, this source of love is the greatest source of pleasure. But when it's gone, it can be some deep hurt. Very, very painful. And so there's another quote, and I don't know who to attribute this quote to because I couldn't find out who said it, but I just want you to know I didn't come up with it, but I think it's good. Falling in love is a socially accepted form of insanity. I think that's true. Falling in love, socially we just accept it, but it's insanity, temporarily anyways. When you fall in love, we're all kind of temporarily insane. Then you may figure out something later on and say, okay, yeah, that was, when I really think about that, wow, I did that? Ooh. And then you start thinking, okay, I need to be rational about this and make some different decisions. But all rationality, all logic, it's gone. You in love. And one of the reasons that you do that is because of what goes on in your mind. Your mind magnifies all of the strengths of the person. You see all the strengths, and that's so big you can't see any of the weaknesses. And that's when we get the word love is blind, because you just can't see what everybody else sees. Everybody else sees it. And so the other thing about erotic love, or eros, is this, and we've talked about, we use this word, it's transactional. It's also transactional because if, that euphoric kind of love is what you are getting out of it. So you're expecting to get something out of the deal. It's conditional. If, in other words, if the other person doesn't agree with you and you don't agree with them and you don't return the favor, then they're not going to produce for you. But at the same time, it's never to be avoided. It's not like, I think when we were growing up as kids in the church that I grew up in, and not all of them was like this, and I think this just happened because we had a deacon who was scared to let the girls and boys sit together. So all the girls had to sit on this side and all the boys had to sit on that side. So, we could never sit together in church. God forbid. And all they did was make you want to get together, and so you just got together whenever you weren't in church and you went somewhere and hid and got together. But you got together. So it's not to be avoided and pretend that it's not there. But when it comes, enjoy the music. But when it's gone, just be grateful. Don't be sad for the rest of your life. But there's a fourth kind of love, which we're going to talk about today, and we're going to end up on this, and that's agape love. And many of us, we thought agape love was just the kind of love that comes from God, and that it wasn't necessarily shared between people. It's like the God kind of love. It is the God kind of love, but we know because we've read what Jesus said, and Jesus said what? Love one another how? As I have loved you. So he wants us to love our spouse with the God kind of love, including all the other loves that we've talked about, but also with the God kind of love, with agape. This kind of love really wasn't known, even in Greek community. This kind of love wasn't known until Jesus actually talked about it. You know, when Jesus came, he said, you've heard that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He was talking about agape. He was saying, you're supposed to love like God loves. You're supposed to love the way that I'm loving you. And he was that example. So agape love is unmotivated. In other words, unmotivated love means that you don't have to do anything to motivate me to release my love to you. Unmotivated. You don't have to be inspirational. It's because of what's in my heart. It comes from within me. It's not prompted by what you do or what you say or what you didn't do or what you didn't say. It's from the inside. It's God-born. It's that kind of love. It's unconditional. There's no condition that you can have that can make me not love you. There's nothing you can do to cause me to stop loving you. There's nothing you can do to make me love you anymore. That's that kind of love. And we should turn that on with our spouses. We should turn that on with our partners. Sometimes we cut them out and think that, okay, Jesus is just saying people, because the people, let's face it, if you've been married a while, the person that you live with can get on your nerve more than anybody else in the world because they know you the best and they got to put up with you the most. And sometimes they get tired of putting up with you and they just let it go. You was all happy and finally they unloaded. And another thing. And you wonder, why? Well, my God, why did you marry me? Anyways. But this kind of love is independent of anything and everything else. This kind of love is directionless. There's no, it just goes out. I mean, you love God, you love people. You can't just say, well, I love these people. This kind of love is what we need in our nation when we have political parties that just split because, one go one way, one goes the other way. We form directions, and we try to get God all involved in it. Like he's like what we say. If you talk to any good Christian Democrat, they would swear that Jesus was a Democrat. If you talk to any good Republican that's a Christian, they would swear that Jesus would be a Republican. And Jesus is neither. I mean, and I have some personal feelings about that. I mentioned it to a couple people, and I didn't mention it to anybody else after that. But, for example, sometimes I think people who are in positions like me, I don't think I should vote because I don't think I should try to sway you which way to vote. I should be neutral, and you should form your own opinions. I shouldn't be trying to get you to vote for a certain person or a certain other person. And we need to understand that that's the kind of love that's directional because that love is independent of the other kinds of love, but that love includes God, and it includes your understanding that God has his hand on your life and that you're not out here by yourself. And so agape love is unmotivated, it's unconditional, it's independent of others, it's directionless, and it's also unlimited. That's because it comes from God. You will not run out of this kind of love. And so let's go to 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, where Paul talks about this. And I'm just going to take two verses out of this chapter. We call this the love chapter. I'm going to take two verses out of this chapter today. Within verses 4 through 7, there are 15 characteristics of love. And we're just going to talk about 7 of them today. We're just going to pick 7 and talk about it. And they're in two verses. They're in verse 4 and 5. Love is patient. That's the first thing Paul says. Love is patient. In the King James Version, and this may be more meaningful for some of you, the King James Version says love is long-suffering. Long-suffering. Patient is a nice word, isn't it? It's like, oh, just patient. Be patient. But when we say suffer long, that's what long-suffering means. Suffer long. Love is long-suffering or patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. There's 3 things. It does not boast. There's 4 things. It is not proud. That's 5 things. I'm going to go through these 7 that we're going to talk about, and then we'll break them down. Next verse says, love is, it does not dishonor others. Wow. So this love doesn't dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. And that's our 7 for today, although the rest of this verse says it is not easily angered. We'll talk about that next week. It keeps no record of wrongs. We'll talk about that next week. But let's get to our challenge today, because in our challenge I want to break these 7 down so that we can leave here with something to do. The first one, your challenge is, first of all, is to love the way Jesus loved. That's what we're talking about, is loving everybody the way Jesus loved. Love my spouse the way Jesus loved. Love my partner that I live with the way Jesus loved. Love the person that I'm engaged to the way Jesus loved. Love the person I'm dating the way Jesus loved. Love my wife the way Jesus loves. Love my friend, love my parents the way Jesus loved. You're adding agape love as the overall encompassing type of love with all of the other kinds of love that you have and that we talked about today. And so your challenge is to love like that. Love your partner by directing your energy for good to make their dreams come true, basically, to make their life better. That's what you're saying I'm here for, and that's what I'm committing myself to do. And then learn how to love your spouse and others based on what they need. This is so important. Based on what they need in order for them to feel love. Now that's different than what you do because of what makes you feel loved. Sometimes we love others by giving them what we would like to have in order to feel loved, because that's all we know. We haven't been taught. Those are the tools that we've had. That's what we've been used to. If I feel loved when this happened, then I feel like if I do that to you, you should feel loved. But they may have an entire different language of love. And so we need to learn what emotional needs they have. That's why we've had you for the last 3 weeks come up with your own list of emotional needs so that you can share them with your spouse. Otherwise, some of us would be married for 40 years and the person would never know what your real emotional needs were. And it's not by doing what makes you feel love, but what makes them feel love. So let's break this down from 1 Corinthians. The first one he talks about is love is patient. In other words, love never pressures the other person. Sometimes we think patience is always with me putting up. But sometimes patient is where I choose not to put any pressure on you because of what I'm expecting. So love never pressures the other person. Love allows as much space and gives that person as much margin as they need for the time that they need it in. You are giving them that space. Whatever, depending on what's going on in their lives. Something may be happening where today, and what's happening right now, they may need some margin. And you give them that margin. Your love is big enough to give them that margin. Sometimes we look at our own rights so strongly when we say, well, no, I have a right to this. And our rights trump giving them the margin to be who they are for whatever they're going through at the time. But love is tolerant and it's understanding. That's what patient love is all about. That's a characteristic of agape love. And then the next thing he says is love is kind. Love is kind, it's considerate. When we think of kindness, we think of, what do you think of when you think of kind? Being nice. It's showing that you have some careful thoughts about that person. You're making sure that you don't create or cause any inconveniences. That's being kind. You're being attentive. You're being mindful. You're being thoughtful. Love is lascivious. Wow, I messed that up. Yes. That's why I put on there, you need to look that one up. But solicitous is talking about where you are overwhelmed. You are so concerned with that person. That's your primary focus. That's the kind of love that when you're trying to be kind, you're trying to make sure that this happens for this person. That's being kind. And then love does not envy. Now, we think of jealousy, and I think, that's one of the worst. Envy is when you don't feel good, so you cause the other person not to feel good about himself just because you don't feel good about yourself. You don't like what's happening in your life, and you don't want nobody else to be happy either. And love doesn't burn with that kind of jealousy where you create negative energy because of what's negatively going on in your life. When you experience negativity in your life, you need to back off and still give love. But when you allow envy to rule, when you experience negativity, that's what you give, is negativity. But love doesn't burn like that. It flips the script and still chooses to be kind, even regardless of what it's going through. And the next one is love doesn't boast. How many of you have been around people who boast about what they do and what they've done? How many of you ever dated somebody that when you first sat down, all they did was talk about themselves? Oh, not for long. Love never speaks of its own deeds or abilities to show itself off, to show, to show self-satisfaction at the expense, and that's the real deal right there, is when you do that at the expense of the other person. It's okay to talk about yourself. It's okay. I mean, you should be excited about whatever your accomplishments are, and you should, there are times when you need to tell the world. There are times when you need to blow your own horn. There are times when that happens, but not at the expense of someone else. And that's what this is talking about. Love does not boast at the expense of someone else. Love listens, and it gives the other person the spotlight. It causes the focus to be on them instead of on me. And sometimes we're not attentive to know that that's what's happening, what's going on. And the next thing is, love is not prideful. Love does not engage in improper and excessive self-esteem. That's what pride really is when you have excess self-esteem. You have so much esteem for yourself that is excessive. Can you imagine having excessive self-esteem? We've seen some examples of it. That's all I'll say about that. Excessive self-esteem that grows into conceit or arrogance. And it divides. This is what the enemy does, and this is one of the characteristics that's been attributed to Satan. And as far as pride is what caused him to fall. Excessive self-esteem, when you get that proud, you end up falling because of what's actually going on in your life. You're too good for yourself. You're more than what you eat. Your words build yourself up greater than your actions are. And you just, you can't live up to your own speech. And then the next thing is love does not dishonor. Love never creates regrets. This is so powerful right here. Love never creates regrets. And it works on making sure that it does not create regrets. Some of you husbands create regrets. And you say, well, I wasn't planning on it. Well, you didn't plan on not doing it either. So we're talking about planning on not creating regrets. And I say that not just husbands, men in general, many times create regrets. Love does not behave disgracefully. It always allows grace to lead, grace to pull, and grace to, it wants the environment of grace and never anything that will cause dishonor to you or the other person. And love always responds in great taste. And so the last thing here that we're going to talk about today of the 7 is love is not self-seeking. Love does not insist on its own rights. We all have rights, but love does not insist on its own rights. And when you can share this kind of love, this is how Jesus loved. Who had more rights than anybody else than Jesus? But all the rights that he had and all the power that he had, he always used his power for the benefit of the other person, never for himself. He always used it for the benefit of the other person. I mean, think about Jesus. When you see people who are great and powered, top of leadership, they come in a restaurant, they want the best table, and even if somebody is sitting in the spot, they want the host to make them move so they can have a spot. It's just self-seeking. Can you imagine Jesus and the disciples coming in, wanting a spot in a restaurant? You think Jesus would make other people move? No. So let's love like Jesus loved. Let's not insist on our own rights. And that's just an example that popped out of my head. I don't know where they came from. But here's some action steps for you today. And I want to make sure you get these. So for the action steps today, you'll need to download something that last Sunday night when I was thinking about what I was going to do for today, I emailed Dr. Harley. I want to show you this book. If you haven't read this book already, this is a book. If you're planning to get married, if you're already married, even if you're not planning to get married, you just to understand your needs and the needs of others, and especially the difference in husband and wife. And I'm sorry, I should have put it on the screen for you so that you could actually see it. But the name of the book is His Needs and Her Needs. And this is by William Harley Jr. And so I emailed them because I wanted to use something out of the book that I want to give you today. And I was pleasantly surprised. I emailed them. They actually called me the next day and told me, sure, you can use this. You can use any of this stuff that's in here. That's their whole deal. That's what they're about, is building marriage. And so this is from Marriage Builder's Emotional Needs Questionnaire. And I would like for you to download this. Even if you're single and don't plan on getting married, this helps you to understand your own emotions. And there are 10 categories of emotions that he will talk about. And so and there are descriptions. So you can download this. We have the link on our Facebook page. I put it there already. It's a PDF that you can download along with today's challenge. And you can get a copy of this. I have hard copies for you today. I have hard copies of the questionnaire also for you today, if you want those. But you can also download it from our Facebook page. Download that. And then the second step is to complete that questionnaire. It's so that you can understand your own emotions and your own needs. And I know you already have a list of needs. I want you to look at the categories that he talks about in this questionnaire. And then the third thing is also to encourage your spouse or your partner to complete the needs questionnaire also. Even if they're not here today, even if they don't like church, they don't want nothing to do with church. This has nothing to do with church. This is not churchy. This is relationshipy. So if you want to have a strong marriage, this helps. But encouraging your spouse or your partner to do this allows you to understand their needs. When you do it, it's so that you understand yours and they can also understand your needs. But you also need to understand what their needs are, because at the end, the fifth thing, well, let's go to number 4 and then I'll talk about that. The fourth thing here is If you feel that there are some categories that are not on this list that you have and that you thought of, add them on there so that you have a whole list of your own feelings and a whole list of your own emotional needs. And then the last thing you do is identify and rank the top 5 of these 10, or if you add some to it, however many there is, rank the top 5 of these emotional needs in the order of how important they are to you. That's your assignment for this week. If you can get that done, and next week I'll have some more instructions for you as to what to do with that. Some more instructions. But if you can get that done, I don't want to give you too much in 1 week. So if you can get that done, then we can make sure that we're on our way. Thomasine and I are so looking forward to being able to do some things for couples. And the last time we did something for couples were probably 2-3 years ago, where we went to Ohio and did like a day and a night with a group of couples. And the title they named that conference "No Regrets." So that was the focus. But then identify and rank those things. And so then that's it for this week. But I want to tell you about what's coming up for the next several weeks. All right? Next 3 weeks. So next week we're going to talk about our love tank. The love tank is always open. And we're going to talk about that. And everybody has one. Even if you're single and don't want to ever get married, you still have a love tank. And so it's not just for married people, not just for couples. So your love tank is always open. Then the following week, we're going to talk about coupleship that leads to marriage. That's for all kinds of, those are couples who are living together but not married. And whatever agreements that you may have, there's a lot of categories even when I say that. There are people who live together and not married and don't ever want to be married, but they just want to live together until one of them gets tired and they move on. There are also couples that live together and they look forward to being married someday. But we want to talk about all of those things on that week. That's the week after next. And then the last week, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about single and happy, or single and whole. In other words, I'm single and I don't care if I ever get married. I'm single, I don't care if I ever have a partner. And we want to talk about being single and being whole. Sometimes in the church world, we make everybody feel like they need to be married. When I was growing up, the old mothers in the church ask you every now and then, honey, you seeing anybody? And then you either have one extreme or the other. They want to make sure you had a partner, or if you had a partner, they want to make sure you weren't going too far with the partner. So, that last week we're going to talk about single and happy. So let me pray for you so that you can get started on this for today. And before I pray for you, I do want to ask if there's anybody here today and you want to make a connection with us at Grace Transformational Ministries, or you'd like to make a connection with your Heavenly Father and you've never done that, or you'd like to make a reconnection if you've done that before, we want to just help you to get started with that today. And if you will meet us, if you're here in the room and you can meet us at the starting point table, and you can let us know where you would like to get started for that. Also, if you're online and you have any of those needs and desires, you can go to our website at gtmusa.org. And if you click on Contact and scroll down to the area where you contact us online, there's an area where you can just type in what you need, type in what you'd like to do. If there's something you'd like for us to pray about, any of those things, fill that out, submit it, and we'll respond to you within 24 hours. So thank you for that. But bow your heads, please, and let me pray for you today. Father, we thank you. You've been so good to us. We honor you. We honor your word. We thank you for this word. We thank you for the ability to share the word concerning love and how you love. I pray today that you would bless us, husbands, wives, partners, singles. God, touch our hearts so that we can understand how important it is to love others the way you love us, to allow that love that you've given and put in our hearts, to allow that love to be shared among others. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Have a good day.